So this is our webinar number 25. We started doing these in the fall of 2021. And this one is focused on caregiver considerations and resources. So a few things. First, thank you for being here. Please mute and have your camera on during the presentations. We do encourage questions, but if you put them in the chat,
our fault.
Or wait until the end. And you can ask them verbally. We'll have time for that. We should. And then if you have a health or other service to recommend to us to add to our site, then please let us know. And we always appreciate knowing how you heard about us. That always helps too. If a little just in the chat would be helpful. You know, we're nonprofit, so we always have to use the word donation. So there it is. And if you're looking for volunteer, please get in touch with us. We have a lot of those. Today's panelists are the following. We have Kelly Osthoff, who is the Senior Director of Programs for the Colorado chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. And each person's email is here too. And Erin Myrent, who is the Program Coordinator for Colorado Respite Coalition, a program of Easter Seals of Colorado. Kay Adams is the founder of Compassion Works and is an author recently. And Luke Wheeland is the Director of Community Outreach, Education, and Communication for a large region of the ARC of Colorado. And everybody will talk a bit more, quite a bit more about what they do in a few minutes. First, just a little bit about who we are and what we do. We created this organization in 2021 in the summer, and our aim is to be the premier information embedded resource for all Coloradans. And why are we focused on doing this? It's pretty simple, because our population is getting older fast. Many people that I talk to are not aware of this. And also it's the fact that we're the second fastest aging state in the country based on the 2010-2019 census. And that's because of all this dark purple that you see here. The other thing I wanted to point out is who we serve. We serve all aging Coloradans and all the caregiver adult children of aging Coloradans. We also serve employers who have folks who are in that sandwich generation and roughly between the ages of 40 and 60. We also serve, of course, our vetted service providers and all organizations committed to healthy aging Coloradans. These are the categories of services that we provide on our website. You can go to our website anytime and just poke around, see what's there. These are the webinars that we have coming up. Obviously, we're on today's here, but we have 3 more in this quarter, and then we'll be scheduling some additional ones for the second quarter of this year. All of our webinars are recorded and all of them are on our website. Now I'm going to introduce our panelists for today, and we'll begin with Kelly Osthoff. So Kelly Osthoff is the Senior Director of Programs for the Colorado chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Kelly is a gerontologist and leads the Care and Support Division of the chapter, providing leadership and quality assurance program in programs and services execution. She represents the organization on the governor-appointed Colorado Commission on Aging, the State of Colorado Alzheimer's Disease and Related Dementias Advisory Committee, and the Department of Health and Human Services Colorado Dementia Partnership Committee, as a key planner for the Rocky Mountain Conference on Dementia and Colorado Conference on Dementia Caregiving. She's a lifelong volunteer with Meals on Wheels and an advocate for older adults. She studied Celtic religion. You're the only person I've ever met that's done this. And history at the University of Glasgow in Scotland, and holds degrees from the University of Denver, University of Northern Colorado, and is currently pursuing a PhD in gerontology with a research focus on dementia caregiving in multi-generational families from the Lutheran Concordia University of Chicago. So Kelly, tell us more about what you do and why you're here today.
Thanks, Bob. I did prepare a presentation, so I want to confirm that you all can see my slides. Can you see that?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Well, it's so nice to be with you all today. As Bob noted, my name's Kelly Osthoff, and I'm the program director at the Alzheimer's Association of Colorado. It always is a little awkward to have your bio read. There's even some pieces in there that I forget about until I hear it, but certainly dementia, caregiving, and caregiving in general is a topic that is meaningful to me personally, professionally, and academically. So it's really a privilege to be here with you all today to share some information on dementia caregiving, some signs of caregiver stress, and then how the Alzheimer's Association can help. The Alzheimer's Association is a nonprofit organization that is a national entity, but we pride ourselves on having strong presence locally. So here in Colorado, we have staff and volunteers spread out across the state. So please know that wherever you're joining, if you're joining from Colorado today, there are a number of resources available to you. If you're joining from outside of Colorado, I did want to note that the Alzheimer's Association is a national entity. So please connect with us wherever you're joining from to make sure that we can help you along your journey. But the mission of the Alzheimer's Association is to lead the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. So many people have heard about the Alzheimer's Association through our fundraising efforts or possibly through our research efforts. The Alzheimer's Association is the third largest funder of Alzheimer's research after the US and Chinese government. And while we invest in research and we invest in improvements to make diagnosis experiences better, really the heart of what we do is to enhance the care and support that families facing dementia receive. There are more than 6 million Americans living with Alzheimer's today. And when we think about Alzheimer's disease in particular, we must not forget the caregivers who surround the people living with dementia. Eventually, someone with dementia will be unable to recognize that they have it, or maybe they will have forgotten that they have dementia, or they're possibly in denial. Whereas as Alzheimer's disease in particular progresses, the family around that person, their friends, their caregivers become quite aware. So this is really a family system disease and condition. It impacts not only the person who is experiencing the symptoms of dementia, but it impacts their entire family system. We estimate that over 11 million Americans are providing unpaid care to people living with dementia. If we were to have paid them, they would have been paid for 16 billion hours of work, valued at over $271 billion. So our unpaid caregivers providing around-the-clock care to those living with dementia are such an important consideration in taking care of them and focusing on their needs so that they can be the best caregivers they can be to the person with dementia. When we boil kind of some of those statistics down to the Colorado level, we estimate that there are about 76,000 Coloradans living with Alzheimer's and 159,000 dementia caregivers here in Colorado. And you can see on the screen the value of their unpaid care, both in dollars and in hours. But what's important to note is that almost a quarter of dementia caregivers, 23.2% of caregivers more specifically, experienced depression. And 14% of caregivers are in poor physical health themselves. Even more striking is that 73% of caregivers have chronic conditions of their own that they're taking care of. So this is really important data to consider because it is not only important that we focus on the care of the person with dementia, but we also focus on the care and well-being of the caregiver. A real quick note about terminology. You may have been wondering what the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia is. Dementia, I like to say, is what you're observing in a person. It is the changes in cognition, memory, thinking, behavior, personality. Alzheimer's disease just happens to be the most common cause of dementia. So if dementia are the symptoms that you may be observing, the changes that you may be observing in a friend or a loved one or a family member, Alzheimer's disease is a disease of the brain that causes about 60 to 80% of all dementia. However, there are other causes to dementia as well. Alzheimer's and dementia are used interchangeably, I think because Alzheimer's we know the most about, but it also is the most common cause. But here on out, I'll simply use the word dementia when we talk about dementia caregivers. We know that caregiving in particular falls heavily on women. 2/3 of caregivers, unpaid caregivers in particular, are women, and 1/3 are daughters. We know that about 1 in 3 or 1/3 of caregivers are over age 65. But what that also tells us is that many of our caregivers are younger. So this really kind of expands the network of people that we need to support when we talk about aging and dementia-related issues. This is certainly not something that just impacts the over 65 population. We know that about half of primary caregivers are taking care of their parents, and 1/4 of dementia caregivers are sandwich generation caregivers. Think back to that image that Bob showed on the screen at the start of this session. Sandwich generation caregivers are in a predicament where they're not only caring for aging parents, but they're also taking care of children in the home. And this is further complicated when their children have additional care needs, such as having an intellectual or developmental disability. So certainly our sandwich generation caregivers, which make up about 1/4 of all dementia caregivers, have their own specific needs. We know that almost half, or 41% of caregivers, have a household income of $50,000 or less. So what that means is that they are under an economic income level, whereas they may experience additional financial burden with their dementia caregiving. We know that 66% actually of people living with dementia are actually living 66% of caregivers, rather, are living with the person whom they're caring for in the community. And the large majority of people with dementia are living in the community, not necessarily in facilities, though certainly people with dementia do live in facility-based residential care. However, the large majority of people with dementia are living in community, and 66% of people who are caring for someone actually live with the care recipient. Now that I've done a little bit of education around terminology and some data and statistics as it relates to dementia caregiving, I want to talk about the signs of caregiver stress. As you can recall, I noted that many caregivers have chronic conditions of their own, experience depression, or are in poor health in general. But what can compound these issues is the stress and burden of caregiving. So I want to talk through what are some signs and symptoms of caregiver stress. I think that caregivers can get so consumed in a loving manner in the care of their loved one, but they often forget about their own needs. So if you are a caregiver or if you know a caregiver, these are signs to look out for to possibly recommend reaching out to the Alzheimer's Association or taking steps to take care of you. We know that caregiver stress may present in denial. This as an example, could be expressed as, I know mom is going to get better. Things will get better. Caregivers may display anger. They may get frustrated in dressing their loved one with dementia. And with the person's challenges, they may say, he knows how to get dressed. He's simply being stubborn. We see caregivers withdraw socially from friends and activities that they once enjoyed. And so someone may say, I don't care about visiting with the neighbors anymore. Or you may have noticed a dementia caregiver stop attending possibly a quilting group that you're in. That social withdrawal is certainly a sign of caregiver stress. They may experience new levels of anxiety and depression, and they may be on a loop thinking, what happens when my loved one needs more care than I can provide, or I just don't care anymore, I just can't do it. We also see new levels of exhaustion. Someone reporting, I'm too tired for this, or I'm just always exhausted. Sleeplessness and lack of rest for caregivers can certainly complicate this situation. We know that people with dementia eventually will need around-the-clock 24/7 care, and they may have trouble sleeping and may start seeking exit or start to wander and become at risk for wandering, which certainly can be a safety concern. So a caregiver may be overly concerned or very concerned about the safety of the person whom they're caring for that causes them sleeplessness. We see new levels of irritability, lack of concentration, and health problems. A caregiver may say, I can't remember the last time I felt good. I've heard a number of caregivers say, I'm worried that I have dementia myself. And certainly, while caregivers can develop dementia and memory loss and those symptoms on their own, it also can be stress, lack of sleep, and just not taking care of themselves that is causing to some brain fog. So it's always important for a caregiver, if they're experiencing these signs of stress on a regular basis, it's very important to talk to their doctor about their own physical well-being, but also their mental health well-being. The Alzheimer's Association, we want to walk along this journey with you. We want to reduce that stress and help you find joy as a dementia caregiver in this journey. Certainly, education and support have been shown to reduce caregiving burden and mitigate the stress I just talked about. Our 24/7 helpline, again, it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, is staffed with master's level clinicians and counselors who can offer just someone to listen to, emotional support, but they also can offer practical tips to help caregivers. We have tons of free information on our website, and we also offer free information and resource referral, disease education, and personalized support through our in-person care consultation and action planning service, which is available here in Colorado. Calling the helpline and requesting information or possibly local follow-up is the best way to access this service. In addition to our care consultation service that we offer locally and through our helpline, we also have over 70 support groups across Colorado. We have an array of education programs and social engagement programs for early stage families that happen across the state. And now they are offered in a variety of formats, including in-person, virtual, or hybrid formats. So certainly our hope is to make these education programs and support groups as accessible as possible. I want to end by sharing 2 additional resources, which include our 2023 conferences. Join us on Thursday, March 2nd for the Rocky Mountain Conference on Dementia. This is a free, live, but virtual event. This is a great event that has a number of excellent sessions that range from the current status of dementia and Alzheimer's science 2 very practical sessions on communication or understanding behaviors, how to navigate the pharmacological world of dementia, how to leverage art and music in caregiving. So a lot of great sessions at that virtual conference. And again, it's free. Then join us on Wednesday, October 11th for the Colorado Conference on Dementia Caregiving, as this year will be the return of our in-person conference at the Hyatt Regency Aurora. Now, there is a fee for this event, depending on if you're a family caregiver or a professional caregiver. The fee will range about $75 to $20. And while there is scholarships available, certainly investing in this day of learning is really valuable. So we hope you can join us. And that is all that I have planned for today. Again, I want to just end on this screen and encourage you all to jot down our helpline number, 800-272-3900. You can call that day or night and get access to our programs and services here in Colorado, but also personalized education and support. So thank you for having me, and I turn the mic over to the next panelist.
Thank you very much, Kelly. That was great. I learned a lot. I didn't know that 2/3 of the caregivers for people with dementia actually it's a 24-hour-a-day job. So that's amazing. And I know that our next speaker, Erin Myrent, will be speaking about that. So I want to introduce next Erin. Erin is the program coordinator for Colorado Respite Coalition, a program of Easter Seals, Colorado. Our statewide program contracts with the Colorado Department of Human Services to expand awareness of and access to respite care services. As a resource hub, we worked with a coordinated coalition of community partners to make a positive impact on the quality of life for caregivers and the individuals they care for. So Erin, take it away. Talk to us about what you do.
Great. Thanks so much, Bob. And thanks so much, Kelly. I feel like you provided so much background for why respite care is so important. So thank you so much. So yeah, I will focus on the resources available through the Colorado Respite Coalition. So I'll go ahead and share this screen. See if I can make it full screen. So the Colorado Respite Coalition is a program of Easter Seals, Colorado. You can see here our mission, and as Bob said, the mission is to strengthen the statewide lifespan respite care resource network. So we exist to connect individual caregivers, family caregivers, and professional caregivers to respite care. It is often a full-time unpaid position in the case of family caregivers, and even understanding what respite care is a barrier for some people to accessing it. So part of why we exist is to explain what respite care is, and something that we're doing now is expanding the definition of what respite care looks like. We have a few things listed here of what we do here at the coalition. We support all ages and care needs. Being a program of Easter Seals, Colorado, we do work with a lot of caregivers of individuals with disabilities, but we cover the lifespan and any extensive healthcare need, which doesn't need to constitute as a disability. It can just be assistance with activities of daily living. We provide families and professionals with online resources. We have an online resource finder, which I've provided the URL address for at the bottom here. We are always working to update the accuracy and add additional resources to our resource finder. And the Easter Seals affiliate network is also in the process of creating a more comprehensive, more user-friendly database for families with disabilities to access resources in their areas. So in addition to that, we also offer training and education for caregivers, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. We have respite grants for professional agencies, which are designed to increase their capacity to provide respite care. We offer respite weekend events for family caregivers. We're We have the privilege of being associated with the Easter Seals Rocky Mountain Village Camp. So that's where we have our totally free respite care weekends for families that provide rest and education that helps connect them to resources. We also offer individual respite vouchers, which I'll also talk about in a few minutes. And then, we do the typical, we have a newsletter, and we also have, so far it's been biannually, but we want to increase this to quarterly statewide webinars where respite care stakeholders throughout the state, you can be a respite care provider, a caregiver, an agency, a lawmaker, anyone can attend our statewide webinars, and the goal is to increase this awareness of respite care and connect us to each other to strengthen that network. Like Bob mentioned, we operate under a grant from CDHS. So the Colorado Respite Coalition exists as to kind of fill the gaps. And our first recommendation to anyone we work with is to connect them with ADRC, which provides options counseling for individuals. So not just with respite care, but any state or local resource they may be eligible for or have access to. Connecting with ADRC is their first line of defense, is definitely the first thing that any caregiver should do if they are looking to take better care of themselves or the person they care for. So we definitely try to make this information available as far and wide as possible. The next item I wanted to cover were these specific events that we have coming up, because they are coming up here in the spring. So in April, we will begin the stress busting program for family caregivers, which is a program that we are licensed to offer through the WellMed Charitable Foundation. It's one of many programs that exist to support caregivers. We are aware that down in the Pikes Peak area, they offer another program called Powerful Tools for Caregivers. So there are many that exist, but we use the stress busting program, and we've seen a lot of success with it in the past. It's a 9-week program for an hour and a half each week, and caregivers meet in a group of about 10 caregivers, so it can be a safe and confidential environment where they can share and talk about. The programs are designed to address both Alzheimer's and dementia and other chronic illnesses. And the goal of the program is to equip caregivers with stress management techniques, like breathing techniques, use of imagery and humor. There's also massage, meditation, and yoga techniques that are taught at the end of each week. And what we find is the greatest benefit to the caregivers is the connection to each other, the space to meet other caregivers and share with each other and hear the experiences of other caregivers, and then connect to resources. So there are just so many benefits for those programs. And we're also looking to improve the experience in those programs, like offering respite vouchers so that caregivers can attend the program. We've made it virtual to reach more people and just make it easier to attend and things like that. So we're always trying to improve the user experience. We also have a coming up for Air Respite Weekend. This event in April, we offer 2 a year. The event in April is specifically for adoptive, kinship, and foster families who are, so families that are caregivers of children that have come to be part of their family through an adoption, kinship, or foster placement. And there is information on the screen, and also, my contact information will be shared if you have any questions about anything presented here. So I mentioned a little bit about our statewide webinars, and our goal with these, again, is just to strengthen this network of respite care stakeholders across the state, and to familiarize all stakeholders with others in their region. So we just want to get folks connected to the different unique needs across the state of Colorado. The folks in Grand Junction have different needs than the folks in Metro Denver. So, trying to be aware of that all the time. And I've just briefly provided kind of an overview of the different support groups we work with. Like Kelly mentioned, there's so many support groups out there for specific healthcare needs. And the ones I've highlighted here, I intentionally highlighted because they're a bit more inclusive in that any caregiver could attend these events and take some value away from them. The Calling All Caregivers, you can be a caregiver of anyone of any age, of any healthcare need, and through an organization called Cardinal LLC with Jane Barton, they're offered monthly. Nadine Cornish-Roberts offers them weekly. And then we also work with another program called Cathartic Conversations, which is a therapeutic journaling program. You know, they're accessible, they're inclusive, and that's why we like to highlight them. We've also recently begun working with the Denver Public Library, and they are a wealth of resources, not only in Denver, but they're connected with the statewide library network. So a lot of offerings they have are available everywhere throughout the state. So another reason we like to highlight our partnership with them. The Memory Cafe was something I wanted to highlight here. I think it's a great program that they highlight. It is in person for caregivers and individuals with dementia and Alzheimer's, and it's a place that they can go where they don't have to worry about remembering, and they don't have to worry about being mindful of others around them, because everyone's going through the same thing. So we are big proponents of programs that serve their individuals in that way. Our big beneficial program that we like to promote is our respite voucher program, and it is limited insofar as that grant funding, as always, is limited, and we serve as a payer of last resort program. So we really are interested in finding families who are not being served in any other capacity through Medicaid or Medicare, and they have no other resources for respite care, and we want to introduce them to respite care, even if it's just on a temporary basis, and introduce them to the idea of respite care can look like a lot of different things. It can look like after school programs, it can look like support groups, it can be a day program, it can be a family friend or neighbor. Respite care can look a lot of different ways. So we've moved to this self-directed model, which may be a familiar term to some of you. We used to operate under an approved provider model where we would vet and run background checks on respite care providers with the goal of ensuring that our recommendations were good recommendations, but it's a major barrier to a lot of families. Ever since COVID, access, the availability of staff to cover respite care has been a challenge. So opening it up to not only empower the caregiver to manage their own care, but give them more options for respite care, no matter where they live, and away from some of the more formal requirements of agencies. Sometimes they had like a minimum number of hours that the caregivers would have to enroll in, and just a lot of common healthcare barriers we're addressing with this self-directed model. So applications are open. I put the URL again on the screen to make it convenient, but if anyone has any questions or you would like to recommend any family, please reach out to me anytime and we can discuss that further. Oh, and then the last thing I would like to highlight as well. So we, like I mentioned, we're a payer of last resort program, so we don't prescribe to Medicaid or any type of funding source specifically, but HIGPUF does focus their efforts in the Medicaid space, and that's what their respite care study is focused on. But we still want to promote this study and help them get as much information about the state of respite care across Colorado as possible. So there's a little bit of information about it here on the screen. And if you have any questions, you're free to reach out to Caitlin or myself, and we can talk about that further as well. So My contact information is here, and I'm happy to share this slide deck with Bob and with anyone else who would like any of the information on it. So thank you so much for your time and letting me share some information about the Respite Coalition.
Well, thank you very much, Erin. We have a question here from Lori Rossi for you. When would a family contact Colorado Respite Coalition versus their local area agency on aging for respite support?
Sure. If they were to contact me and had not contacted those agencies, I would refer them there. So it doesn't, they can do either, but I try to refer them to those agencies because they have a lot more resources than we do.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for doing what you're doing, and we appreciate knowing more about the Colorado Respite Coalition.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, there we go. Our next speaker is Kay Adams. So Kay is a dementia coach and educator, empowering care partners and organizations, and the author of Bedside Witness, Stories of Hope, Healing, and Humanity. She's the founder of Compassion Works, LLC, where she enthusiastically engages care partners and organizations impacted by dementia through coaching, consulting, education, and training, so they're empowered to effectively face the challenges with confidence, clarity, and connection. Kay has over 30 years of experience counseling and coaching individuals and families around a broad array of complex emotional and health-related challenges, and has worked extensively in the fields of geriatrics, hospice, palliative care, and mental health counseling. Over the years, Kay has developed a strong passion for serving people impacted by dementia and founded Compassion Works in 2017 to focus her time and energy on empowering family and professional caregivers through coaching, consulting, education, and training. Okay.
Thank you, Bob. It's great to be here. I have a lot of people that I know on this call today, and it's just really thrilling to spend a little time with you all. So, so it gave me that great introduction. I just wanted to start with, so first and foremost, whatever hat I wear, I'm a social worker through and through. And so I always want to be proactive, and I want to support, and I want to educate, and I want to validate people's experiences. And that's really what led me to picking dementia as a field to really focus on, because I was a hospice social worker for 8.5 years. And during that time, the folks that my team and I took care of all lived in nursing homes, assisted livings, and memory care here in Denver. So a very large portion of the patient population I helped take care of for all that time were living with some form of dementia. It might have been end stage dementia, or it could have been along with cancer or heart disease or lung disease. So I really got a bird's eye view into that illness up close and personal for 8.5 years in hospice. And I spent another 8.5 years in Kaiser, 4.5 of which were in the diagnostic memory clinic. So it was a specialty team diagnosing dementias. And then 1.5 years as a home-based dementia specialist for Denver. And the commonality I found, like Kelly spoke to, is that their caregivers are under so much stress. People living with dementia are struggling in so many areas, and families don't know where to go, or they don't have enough help. And so I really just decided I wanted to focus on that population because the need was so great. So how I sort of developed this passion for supporting people around these physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, financial stressors that caregivers have really started with one particular daughter that I worked with in hospice. And I was probably 6 months into the hospice job. So I was naive, I was new, I was green. I hadn't been around dementia much at all, except my grandparents. And we just got a patient admitted to our hospice service under the end stage Alzheimer's disease. And this woman was nonverbal. She couldn't feed herself, dress herself. She was bedbound, very end stage of the disease. And when I came to meet her in her memory care assisted living apartment, I found her daughter there that day. And I spent about an hour talking with the daughter. She was grieving, she was crying, trying to prepare herself for what was coming. And one of the things that she said to me was profound that day. She pointed over to her mom in the bed and said, "That's not my mom in that bed over there. My mom died 7 years ago when the dementia hit." And I have to be honest, I remember thinking back and thinking, of course that's your mom, her name's on the door. You have pictures all around the room. You guys look alike, of course it's your mom. But what I didn't understand, that what she was trying to tell me, was that the relationship that had changed with her mom because of the dementia over all those years, and how profoundly it had changed, and all the grief and loss. I was only seeing the very last chapter of their lives together. I didn't get to see the whole story. And so after 8 years in those kind of environments, I'm a slow learner, but I started to get it and really feel for the families and the people going through this illness. And one of the things I really became aware of is that folks need a whole lot more support than they can get. And it takes a village. It takes all of us on this call and more to support all of these families with the millions of people impacted by this disease. So my goal as a dementia coach and educator is to help my clients manage caregiver stress and to build resilience in a number of ways. One of them is to try to teach people to realistically and compassionately adapt their own expectations, first and foremost of themselves as care partners, and then of their loved one living with dementia. I've never met a population of people so hard on themselves as caregivers tend to be. They think they should never lose their temper. They should never become impatient. They should never become frustrated when someone's asked them the same question 25 times in 5 minutes. And I start with, let's just throw that expectation out the window because it's not going to happen. We're human, right? We're going to react. So I really want to help support and coach people around, setting realistic expectations because that helps their stress level. I also try to help folks to understand the symptoms and the progression of the various forms of dementia that their family members or loved ones may be living with, because in all the diseases that I worked with in hospice over all those years and in palliative care, I personally have not come across an illness that is more misunderstood than dementia is. Because if you ask most people on the street what's dementia or what's Alzheimer's, they're going to say it's a memory problem. And if they only think it's going to affect the person's memory, they are not ready. Because what it is a terminal illness, right? And it changes everything. When you have a disease in your brain, it changes everything: your mood, your personality, your executive functioning skills, your independence, all of it. And so one of the things I offer is a monthly workshop called More Than Memory, Understanding Brain Change and Dementia from the Inside Out, that I have families go through to get a really good baseline of understanding of dementia. Because then that's a starting place to build skills. Once you have some knowledge about what's going on, then you can start building some skills to match that. I also think it's super important when working with care partners to provide some emotional support around helping them practice self-care. Easier said than done. A lot of the care partners I work with don't even have 10 minutes a day of time to themselves, because their loved one takes so much care. So just tiny incremental changes that they can start increasing their own self-care to try to keep healthy themselves. Setting healthy boundaries is a really important skill I work with caregivers around. Practice asking for help. Oh, this is a really hard skill for most people to do. And then it's trying to build a care team early. So identifying that it's not if, it's when you're going to need more people. It's going to take a village to help you with your family member. And let's start building that early, not later when you're so isolated and overwhelmed. So that's one of the things that I really think is important in supporting folks around their stress levels, and also teaching people skills so they can be more effective at communicating. I find that, when people lose language skills and comprehension skills, it becomes really hard to communicate with your loved one, and communication can break down. That can really undermine relationships a lot. So being able to support folks by teaching them skills that they can use with their loved one goes a long way, as does helping them recognize what they can and can't control. So for a lot of us, I think our stress is driven by those things. I think about in the beginning of COVID, I felt like I had no control of anything in my life. And I still kind of feel like that feeling's never really left me entirely, but how out of control we all felt, and how fearful and how stressful that is to feel that way. So trying to help care partners identify what is within their control and what things can they work towards letting go of, because that also can alleviate a lot of stress and keep them healthier mentally and physically. And another thing that I think is really important in supporting folks is to help them understand a concept that Teepa Snow, leading dementia educator that I'm trained under, taught me. And she talks about the concept of the donut and the hole. So if this is the donut, we have the impact, the intact part of the donut, and then we have the hole. And so when she's referring to the hole, it's the pieces that are missing. It's the losses that the person living with dementia has been experiencing over time. The loss of cognition, the loss of communication skills, the loss of executive functioning skills, the loss of impulse control, all of these things, ability to work and become, stay independent. So those are represented by the whole and the donut. And so I work a lot with folks to try to say, we need to grieve those losses along the way. We need to recognize them. We need to talk about them. We need to be realistic about them. And we also need to talk about the donut. We need to focus also, and just as importantly, on what is left, what the person can still do, their humanity, how you can connect with them, maybe not the same way that you used to be able to connect with them, but how you can go to that, intimate level with them and be present in their lives as much as humanly possible. And balancing those two opposing factors is no easy ride for anybody. And it takes a lot of practice, but I guess fortunately in the dementia realm, things keep changing. So care partners have a lot of opportunities to practice these skills. So I really think it's important also to support people around their grief, anticipatory grief. They start grieving when they know there's a diagnosis, or maybe even before, when they know their loved one has changed and they don't know why. And so it's not grieving after they've died, it's grieving all the way along, all those losses that woman who said, "That's not my mom in that bed over there," was trying to communicate to me. So helping support folks through those anticipatory grief periods and the ambiguous loss, which means the person I love is still here physically, but they're not the same person anymore. They can't remember my name. They can't remember who I am in the family. They don't know how to relate to me anymore. So they're still my dad or my husband or my brother, but our relationship has changed because of this disease. And that's a whole lot of really individualized support to provide to people that I think is immensely important. So they mentioned my book here earlier, and Bob gave me permission to plug it. So one of the upsides of COVID for me was I finally got to write a book I've been dreaming of writing for 20 years. Jane Barton, who Erin just mentioned, wrote the foreword for my book, and I get to plug it here. It's called Bedside Witness: Stories of Hope, Healing, and Humanity. And it took me 18 months to write it. It's a collection of vignettes about my work in hospice, palliative care, geriatrics, and in my dementia coaching business. 2/3 of the stories are about dementia-related themes and all the things that I have learned from the patients and families I've been so blessed to work with and support over the years. And sort of a little bit like chicken soup for the soul. So there's a lot of teaching embedded in the stories. And I find that that's also a very helpful resource for personal caregivers and professional caregivers alike. And since I didn't do a PowerPoint today, the best way to get a hold of me, to ask any questions or find out more information, is just to go to my website, which is my name, kmadams.com, KAYMADAMS.com. And you can find out everything you need to find out about me right there. So thanks so much for letting me be with you all today. Back to you, Bob.
Well, thank you, Kate. That was great. And I'm sure a lot of people on this call will appreciate reading the stories in your book.
Available on Amazon.
On Amazon, okay. And maybe a local bookstore or all Amazon?
It depends. It's kind of hit and miss. If you go in and ask for it, they'll often order it. So, that's the way to kind of spread it around. But so far, I've a couple local bookstores, hit and miss, but Amazon's been the most consistent place that people, or Barnes and Noble or different places like that online.
Okay, well, congratulations on getting it out there.
Thank you.
It was in the oven for a long time before you actually
The oven of my brain for a long time finally got out. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, our next speaker is Luke Wieland. So Luke is the Director of Community Outreach, Education, and Communication for the ARC of Colorado, and is responsible for the administration of all educational offerings and community outreach activities at the ARC Arapahoe, Douglas, and Elbert counties. Luke is a Colorado native and holds a degree in sociology from Colorado State University. He's witnessed firsthand the transition and steady progression of the quality of life options for individuals with disabilities, as his parents worked in the IDD field for over 35 years. Luke grew up around people with disabilities and individuals striving to achieve independence and a meaningful life. Luke began his own career working with individuals with IDD by occupying a variety of roles, including managing a program approved service agency and senior program manager to interim case manager for developmental pathways for over 10 years. Luke is a fan of the Broncos, New York Yankees, and quirky quips. Maybe he'll have some quirky quips for us today. So Luke, tell us more about what you do and why you do it. And I know from talking to you previously that there is a significant increase in the potential for people with IDD to get dementia at a much younger age than the rest of the population. So we look forward to hearing what you have to say about all that. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Bob. Thank you all for being here today. I can say starting off, I can talk a little fast, so tell me to slow down if you need it. But B, the Respite Coalition, we use them a lot to help families just make sure they're getting breaks. It is so important for caregivers to take that break and care for yourselves. The Alzheimer's Association of Colorado, the U.S. That help line that they gave out, personally used it with our family. Our grandmother really helped our family, so it is a great resource, even just to call and listen to start off. But I work for the ARC. The ARC, we're in every state in the country. We're a national organization that works for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. For those of you that might not know what that is, that would be people from autism to Down syndrome and everyone in between. The ARC across the country, each state kind of operates a little differently. Here in the ARC, the state of Colorado, we have 15 chapters. Bob, if you would show that map I'd sent you. We cover the entire state. Here in Colorado, we are free. We offer free advocacy and support to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or from now on, I'll say IDD, families to connect to local resources, to connect with their state Medicaid services. If you'd scroll down for me, Bob. If you don't know, if you've heard of the ARCs before, especially along the I-25 corridor, you'll see the little ARC thrift bird. The ARC thrift is our funding source. So we don't ask for money from the state. We don't ask for money from school districts, from families. We provide free services because of what the thrift stores help us provide. We work from birth to death with people with IDD, meaning that we help them with special education. So IEPs 504s through their adult lives, getting into for their adult lives through the disability world. We work closely with each chapter. As Bob said, I work for the ARC of Arapahoe, Douglas, and Elbert County. So that's that southern part of the state. If you're not here in the state of Colorado, this map shows all the chapters here in the state and how to connect with them. But if you're from a different state or just don't want to write down the information, the ARC of the US has a Find My Chapter feature. It's right there on the front page of the ARC of the United States. You type in your zip code and it will give you the local chapter in any state here in the US, phone number, website, and contact information. We work hard across the country here in the state to make sure people with IDD are respected parts of their community. Bob, if you'd flip over to that next one pager I sent you. Here in the state of Colorado, we, like I said, the ARC, Arapahoe, Douglas, and Elbert provide those supports as a nonprofit organization, helping people with IDD in their community access support. If you'd scroll down for me, Bob, what we really do is advocate. We advocate for people with IDD and their loved ones to be part of their community, get the benefits that we need. A lot of people with disabilities have a lot of abilities to do things on their own and do things really, really well. But we also push for people with IDD to really, get the supports they need from the federal government, the state governments, and then local entities here in the state. We again provide that educational, so special education, 504 IEPs support, along through social offerings and a lot of different inclusive opportunities. So you don't have to have a disability to come hang out and be with us and enjoy our time. Today, I really wanted to spend just a little bit on people with disabilities and dementia. dementia and Alzheimer's. We are a different population. As you know, people with individual and developmental disabilities really need some supports, and will have some caregiving needs throughout their lives. Unfortunately, because of their disability at times, we start missing early signs of dementia. There's a lot of data out there that shows people with intellectual and developmental disabilities will have early onset dementia, early onset Alzheimer's. Some individuals as early as their late 20s, early 30s. We're finally kind of in that generation of the first generation of people with disabilities actually aging. Historically, people with IDD had not aged as much, as they weren't able to get into the general population age groups of that passing away in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Up until the mid 80s, the medical technology just wasn't there to help early enough to kind of save off some of those needs that people with IDD need to kind of have those procedures done. That's changed. Technology's caught up, and people with intellectual and developmental disabilities will live roughly about the same lifespan as a general American citizen in the United States here. So into their 60s, 70s, 80s. So dementia and Alzheimer's is going to impact their lives just like it would anybody else. Unfortunately, how the brain is wired with just anyone in general population, we're all unique. We all have that different wiring perspective. So people with IDD have it a little bit differently also. So we have some components where we need them to be kind of supported and monitored and helped differently. An IDD, that dementia component, a lot of times is overlooked as a behavior or overlooked as part of their disability. And so we really work with caregivers through the ARCs and through the community center boards and Medicaid here in the state of Colorado to make sure that you're paying attention to your loved ones. If you have a loved one with a disability, making sure that you know kind of what their everyday tasks that they're able to help complete, able to support you with, or that need support with, and what that really looks like for them as they age. A lot of times, if they're able to do their own personal hygiene, brush their hair, brush their teeth, then all of a sudden they're not able to. Doctors, physicians might look at that as, oh, it's a behavior, it's part of their disability, it's not necessarily anything else. And that prolongs the diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's. Unfortunately, that could be the first signs for us in the disability world. A lot of people with IDD typically don't get diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia until that middle or late stage, like Kelly and them with the Alzheimer's Association have information on. Because it's just not looked at as that is not a behavior for them. If you have a loved one with IDD and you're worried that they might be having some memory issues or memory loss, sometimes it also comes off as mental health issues with our population. So really making sure that you're recording kind of what they're doing, what their daily lives look like, and how that's different than it's been in the past, and referring that to your physicians, their doctors, so they know that this is not just part of their autism diagnosis or part of their other diagnosis or mental health. With people with IDD and needing support and caregiving throughout their lives, again, some live independent lives like anybody else, some need a lot more support, and a plethora in between that. We know that caregiving is hard. Caregiving takes a lot of stress and a lot of time and effort, and we commend that from people. The ARC US, the ARCs here in Colorado, all on our websites have different caregiving strategies, ways to make sure that you're taking breaks, you're taking that time to recharge your batteries. The Respite Coalition and respite services here in the state of Colorado through Medicaid and other entities are ways to take those breaks. If you have never heard of what a waiver is or a community center board, please reach out to your local ARC chapter, and we can definitely help connect you with those here in the state, because those are lifelines for caregivers. It really helps provide those, not only supports your loved one will need from their birth to death through their lifespan, but also the supports for you, so you can be that caregiver as long as you can, or as long as you want. The ARC also works closely with families to have those conversations of when it's time for you to no longer be that caregiver. We all know as everybody ages, your needs and your strengths also will decline. So there's going to be a time where your loved ones will outlive you. with disabilities, and that's part of the natural flow of life. And something that we, here at the ARCs really support, that you don't need to be a caregiver forever. We understand your loved one is your child, your young adult, whatever that might look like for you. But there's a time where the system can help take some of that off your plate, and we can build in supports to make sure they're cared for and taken care of throughout the rest of their lives. The sooner the better we get into those supports to help you as a caregiver not be that sole provider is definitely helpful. On that, the idea of how that relates into that dementia component and Alzheimer's is, again, your loved one best. I always say I've been in the system my entire life. I've worked with people with disabilities. I've been around them since I was born. Both my parents worked in this field. And so I could get through a night, providing respite for a family or an individual. Is it going to be perfect? No. We're going to get through it. But the more you can tell me, the more you can give me information on how to help and support that loved one, the better I'll be. It's the same idea with how to talk to your physicians and doctors and providers. So as your loved one ages, again, Down syndrome, we have a ton of studies on throughout the lifespan of people with Down syndrome in general, knowing that they have early onset Alzheimer's or dementia as a pretty typical thing. Not everyone will, but a higher number of people with Down syndrome will have it. Again, I've seen it as early as early 30s, if not late 20s, where other disabilities just haven't been studied well enough to know, or those diagnoses like autism haven't been around that long to really know if that is someone with that diagnosis is more prone to Alzheimer's or dementia. We do know that any brain, impact to a brain capacity can lead to help kind of some of that. So we're more than likely going to see people with the disability world aging into dementia care and needing that level of support. So again, the ARCs are here. We're free in the state of Colorado to help connect you to resources, connect you to supports, hear what we can do to help you, or be there in meetings with you to kind of help navigate the tough system we live in here in Colorado. It's not an easy system we run. So, but realistically, helping people with IDD live within their community like everybody else and thrive. So if there's any other questions on what the ARCs can do or how that looks with dementia and disability, I know we're gonna, open it up to some question and answers here, but I'd love to, be able to help you all. If my contact information, I know it's on should be on the flyer. If not, I can throw it in the chat. And if you need to connect with us or your local chapter of the ARC, we can definitely help you there.
All right,
Bob, I think it's back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Luke. I had a couple of things for you, Luke, in particular, and then we'll open it up to other questions. You mentioned that people with IDD, in particular Down syndrome, are living longer. And I'd appreciate if you talk a little bit more about why that is. And then, because I think a lot of people, including myself, did not know why. And then the other thing was, you mentioned when a family caregiver of an IDD child who is no longer a child, is actually an adult themselves, can no longer be a caregiver, that you can provide some, I guess, basically taking over that role. Could you talk more about how that works?
Yeah. So the first question, why people with disabilities are living longer. In the early 80s, we started moving people with disabilities out of what we call institutional settings here in the United States. I have the pleasure of my father being one of those people helping the state of Colorado do that. Meaning I lived in the institutional setting as a kid on site. So it's proven that living within a community, within a caring community, will increase your lifespan. So living kind of in an institutional setting is not the best for mental health and overall general health. B, medical technology finally caught up. Again, Down syndrome is the most well-known disability, and autism is definitely trying to catch up there, but it's because of the physical components of Down syndrome. You're diagnosed at birth, even now pre-birth, that was not known. until birth, you know, when I was born in the early 80s. But there's a lot of medical conditions that are aligned with someone that has Down syndrome. One of the biggest is they typically have either a heart murmur or different issues with their heart, and they need open heart surgery. And in 1980, that was done when they were 3, 4, 5 years old, because the technology wasn't there to really get in there when they were an infant. Nowadays, it's done as early as 3 weeks. So again, the idea of, as you know, the impact on surgery and medical care, the younger you are, the easier it is to heal, easier it is to recover. That goes the same for when you're, you know, as you get older, you break a bone, you know, it takes longer to heal that bone and break that, you know, and mend that, as where young kids don't have to do that as much. Secondly, it's that we, you know, the study of people with disabilities and knowing, you know, what level of support and how to really kind of figure out what their medical care is. So someone that's nonverbal, non-mobile, non-able to kind of communicate their wants and needs, we've developed technology so they can speak, ways that they can have a voice, ways that they can show to us what really matters to them, through communication devices like Apple iPads and talk devices, meaning so that when someone's talking about their stomach hurting, we can actually hone in on what that really means and get them the care they need. Unfortunately, you know, prior to the early 80s, it was more of a kind of idea of, is this really what's going wrong? And doctors were kind of checking and judging, not necessarily going off of what the actual person was communicating is wrong with them. Just like you wouldn't want a doctor just kind of guessing at what might be the ailment you're dealing with. Thirdly is the home and community-based care system. People living in their own home, in their own community, having their own voice, and Medicaid being strong, so that Affordable Care Act and the, you know, People with Disabilities Act, really having some teeth behind it so that people can validate themselves and really be their own mentor, has led to people with disabilities being in general studies of health, people with disabilities being in Alzheimer's and Down syndrome, Alzheimer's and dementia studies, because they have a brain just like the rest of us. And so understanding how they work, how it's wired, has led to a lot of, you know, betterments in technology and betterments in drug care and support for people with disabilities, across the board. Bob, sorry, what was your second question?
Well, the second question was, you mentioned basically taking over care of a person when the caregiver can no longer do that. And that question is for you, but it's also for our other three panelists too. So we'll start with you, Lou.
Sure, I'll give a quick one. I mean, here in the state of Colorado and across the country, there's different things we call through Medicaid called waivers, that help provide a level of support for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and other disabilities, from brain injury to, you know, spinal injury cord and things like that, the elderly, blind, and disabled, things like that help provide care. So, you know, that level and spectrum of care can be, you know, where they're doing a little bits here and there, they're going to maybe a program, you know, or going to work and having supported, you know, so they can have a job and different things. But as that care level increases, or the, you know, parent kind of natural support caregiving needs to change, our system does have systems built in place where people live in other people's homes and they're the primary caregiver. They can live in their parent family home still and have caregivers come into the home and help with them, all paid for through the Medicaid system, through Medicaid with this person with a disability. So not at the caregiver, not at the parent or the natural support's expense as they get older, but at the Medicaid's expense. And there's a whole laundry list of how we get people into those services and how we access them. The ARCs across the state of Colorado are here to help families. Again, we can get kids in as young as, you know, really right after birth into like early intervention and supports into, you know, supports through the Medicaid system all the way through their adult lives and, you know, until they're, you know, pass on their own lifespan.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful. So that same second question to the rest of our panel, would anybody else care to comment on that?
Bob, I can provide an answer to that. So, you know, there are a lot of care options for families facing, you know, needing care for their loved one with dementia. Of course, it can include home care in the community or facility-based care that ranges from memory care, possibly in an assisted living environment, to more skilled nursing care that occasionally has a secure environment if necessary. So there are a variety of options. The challenge that our families face is paying for those resources. People tend to fall into one of three categories. There are people who automatically are below a certain level of income and assets, whereas they can qualify for long-term care Medicaid. And then, of course, there are people on the very high end who have plenty of resources to privately pay for care and not even change their lifestyle. The challenge is for those folks who fall in the middle, who maybe have some finances, but not a whole lot, but yet they don't qualify for Medicaid. And so planning for care in the future is incredibly important. So some people may have long-term care insurance that could cover some paid care, or people may be veterans or caring for a veteran, whereas they can access care through the VA. But it really depends by person and what their personal situation looks like. But certainly there are a variety of options that range from home care to facility-based care. And I'd be remiss not to mention the great resource that adult day programs are for just a day of care.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Erin, Kay, do you have any further comments?
I just wanted to comment briefly that I agreed with everything Kelly just said, and the cost is, incredibly expensive. But one of the things I find is that one of the main coaching questions I get from new clients is, how will I know when is the right time to put my loved one in a place, in assisted living or memory care or anything? And cost aside, I usually say, well, it's really dependent on you. So, they think it's all these other things when the doctor tells them, when I tell them, when someone else tells them, but it's really about the caregiver stress. It's directly related to the level of caregiver stress the caregiver's under and how long they can manage under that or not. And unfortunately, it's also crisis driven a lot. It's a fall, it's an infection, it's a hospitalization or a rehab stay. And now suddenly that person is no longer able to walk independently, right? Or do other things or they can't get themselves up, and the caregiver's, 90 and can't lift them. And so that's, again, back to that planning. I always say to people, it's not if, but when. So if you can build a care community creatively, you could sustain, helping that person at home for a lot longer than doing it yourself. So again, that's why I'm really a big proponent of people reaching out and saying, let's build community around helping each other, because we're all going to be in these shoes eventually, it feels like. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Kay.
And on the disability side, someone with an intellectual developmental disability, it's making sure we meet families where they're at and making sure that we know how that level of support they need. It might not be, as Kay said, of when you can no longer do it, also means that that person with the adult with a disability needs a higher level of care than you're able to provide. So a lot of times when we're looking at out of home, finally out of like their caregiver, out of parent home kind of placement, or if they're living on their own and need to be moved into more of a kind of group setting, or they can live in, long-term care facility or nursing facilities, it's once the person with the disability has reached the threshold of the level of care they need can no longer be provided either by the system we have in place at home to caregive or the caregiver themselves. So a lot of the main example is, people get heavier as you get older. Like you grow as, when they're 9, 10, 13, 18, you might be able to lift them in and out of the tub, move them, around their home if they don't have mobility issues. When they're 35 and you're 65, that's a lot heavier of a person. And so you're no longer able to provide that level of safe care for them. And they've outgrown your level of support. And that's a really tough thing for families, is to really, especially for a family with a person with an intellectual developmental disability they've cared for their whole life, that they have this guilt of, I can't let them go, I can't move them beyond me. And so we really work hard on helping families kind of get through that grief and that kind of guilt component of being no longer being the primary caregiver for their loved one.
Thanks, Luke. Erin, did you have some comments?
Yeah, I've been throwing stuff in the chat as I think of it, but we are familiar with the 5 wishes document, which I think is kind of a commonly used document. It is, oh, the phrase is escaping me now, but it's like a legally binding document, even though we keep copies of it here in our
Advanced
office.
directive.
And yeah, it's it's a very unintimidating document, but you can use it and share it with your primary care physician and keep it as part of your own personal medical record. And then the Caregivers Guardian is a group we work with, and I believe, I don't think they're free services, but they do offer help with end-of-life care and planning.
Okay, thanks, Erin. I think 5 wishes is on our website as well. The Care Guardian is one I had not heard of, so thank you. Okay, do we have any other questions from anyone? You can unmute and ask a question if you'd like. We have a few more minutes, and if you don't, that's fine.
I see Renee has her hand raised.
Oh, okay, I missed that. Hi, Renee. Go ahead, please. There you
Hi,
go.
I was just curious about workshops that Kay Adams might have. I think she mentioned that she does have some, and I was just questioning if it's on her website or was she, if she does it anywhere else as far as a workshop type program with either the ARC or some other organization.
Hi, Renee. Yes, if you go to my website, it has a whole deal on speaking and workshops. And I have a variety that I have done before, and then I do new ones constantly. And they're usually a combination of personal and professional care partners. I'm lucky enough to present at the Rocky Mountain Symposium on Dementia, March 2nd, isn't it, Kelly? I think. So I do a lot of things in the community. I do it for private organizations. I do my own workshop virtually every single month. And I do stuff in person and, online. So you can message me off of my website and talk to me more about that. And I'd be happy to chat with you.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, Kay. Do we have any other questions before we go? Okay. Well, seeing none, I want to thank everybody, all of our panelists today for their presentations and answering our questions. You're all doing wonderful work, and we really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you who attended today. All right. Well, with that, we'll close for today. The webinar recording will be available in a few days. We do a minor bit of editing before we post it. And thanks for the clap. We all appreciate that. Okay, so you all have a great day, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.